Okay, there is a comment. Can you speak on free will, please? Okay, so this is a difficult topic, free will. I have this chapter in my book, Do We Have Free Will? And the answer is way more complicated than a yes or a no. The concept simply is that everything is will of God. However, the human organism is supposed to act as if you have complete free will, knowing that the outcome is predetermined. And that brings freedom and peace. Now, what do we mean by God? That is to be examined before we talk about free will. God here is not a separate, all powerful entity in manifestation that keeps a tab on its creation. God simply is this consciousness animating reality, animating all perception. Here and now, whatever is arising is God. God does not have an agenda. The consciousness does not animate with agenda. It simply animates or paints following its own nature, which the human object or the created object cannot make any sense of. So if we find ourselves in a position where we have to make a decision, then we just make a decision with the understanding that the decision has already been made and the outcome has already happened. You know, uh, generally, Ramesh would make a joke about this and he would say that human beings are designed in this way that when something good happens, they say it is the grace of God. And when something bad happens, they say it is the will of God. Will of God is grace. But mind lives with its own ideas of right and wrong, good and bad, moral, immoral. So we get trapped. Now, the greatest problem with this idea is that the doubt comes up. If everything is will of God, then why should I do anything? Why should I even get up in the morning? And the answer is, well, if you don't want to get up in the morning, don't get up in the morning. If you don't want to do anything, don't do anything. But the question is still, how long will you do nothing? Are you truly capable of doing nothing? Because something will happen. If not physically, psychologically, things will happen. If you do nothing, let's say sit on the couch and just watch television or scroll social media, the mind will keep racing. The mind will keep troubling until you get up and take action. So, action has to happen. Now, the only thing is, when this is understood that everything is will of God, it just drops the load of guilt and shame that we carry for so perceived our actions. The feelings of guilt and shame are tied to the belief that I am a separate doer. But when this notion is dropped that everything is happening and nobody does anything, that is the true understanding that everything is God's will. Everything is being animated by the impersonal energy that does not have an agenda, that does not have morality, that does not have ideas like human mind has. But when we imagine God as a separate entity in manifestation, a loving, benevolent, kind entity, then we are superimposing our image of God and projecting it onto that object. What we want a God to be. Then we get disappointed. Then we say, why does God create wars? Why does God create disabled children? Why does God create hate? We never question, why does God create normal children? Why does God create love? Because when we are happy, these questions never pop up. It's only when there is some restlessness inside that we begin to question life and living, and we challenge the will of God. Someone once asked me, if everything is will of God, should I intervene in a conflict? And my response was, if you think you should intervene in a conflict, then by all means intervene. But remember that despite your intervention, things may not happen according to your preferred outcome. If you intervene with this understanding, you will not create any hurt for yourself. But if you intervene with this understanding that I am going to change the other, then you may experience pain because things may not happen the way you desire. So, two things happen when we intervene. Sometimes our intervention is successful, and in that case, the separate self can extend as pride and arrogance, which is again pain. And sometimes our intervention is unsuccessful, and in that event, the separate self extends in horizontal time as shame and guilt, which is again pain. But when there is this understanding that there is no separate doer and everything is will of God, then the pain in the moment does not extend into horizontal time as shame and guilt, or let's say the failure in the moment, the failure of intervention in the moment will not turn into pride, into shame and guilt. or the success of intervention will not turn into pride and arrogance. Momentary, everything will be experienced, but it will not become our story because we know that the only writer is God. In the Sikh scripture, Gurbani, the very first line of the Mool Mantra says Karta Purak, Ekomkar, Karta Purak, Ekomkar, one, Karta Purak, the one who makes it possible. How it makes this possible is beyond our understanding because our mind has limited data. Think of it like this: a machine that has limited data will not be very efficient in predicting the outcome than a machine that has a huge data set. The accuracy of the machine that has a big data set will be higher. So the data set of consciousness is way more than our limited mind. So our mind may say, oh, if everything is will of God, then why so much injustice in the world? I just received a comment, I think maybe a day or two around this. Somebody just, saw a short clip of mine somewhere and they immediately commented, but what if the violence is happening and somebody's suffering and will you call that God's will? And yes, I would say that yes, that is God's will too. But the thing is, are we talking about the same God? Yes, injustice, violence, it hurts. No denying that it does hurt. And it is clear that in duality, the polaric opposite will always be there. So, the God, or let's say consciousness, that creates Mahatma Gandhi will also create Adolf Hitler. Acceptance of the polarity brings peace.